Everybody came, right? Everybody can hear me? Hello? Okay, great. Can you not hear me, Ron? Is that better? Okay, great. Welcome, everyone, to our quarterly Procurement Council meeting. As you can see from the agenda, we do have a number of items. So I want to make sure we get right to that. First off, as is a great excitement to me always when new members of the council are seated with us, I wanted to introduce Amber Mooney, who is a legislative appointee and is actually working with the Jeff Lawrence Manufacturing Fund, supporting small and medium manufacturers across the state. Is that not correct? Oh, I have them mixed up. Sorry. Okay, great. So thank you for being here. I apologize. Don't worry, I will get other things wrong too. It's not just you. And then Sean Cullinane, would you pronounce it for us? Great, thank you. And Sean, you're from previously from the village of Lyndhurst?
Correct.
Right? And also serving as counsel for the Association of Towns and Villages, or the Cities and Villages?
New York State Association of City and Village Clerks.
Excellent.
I'm also a member of the Village of Lyndhurst Business Improvement District.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. So for the benefit of the new members, there are a couple of places where we'll stop and walk through some of the procedures for the council, just so that everybody is on the same page. So thank you guys very much for being here. And if I can find my agenda, we'll get started. Great. The first action for consideration today is approval of the February 8th, 2017 meeting minutes. Are there any corrections for the meeting minutes, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, Tom, you're going to motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
You'll second? Great. Ron from NYS PSP?
Yes.
Has seconded. So all in favor of approving the meeting minutes, please say aye, or signify by raising your hand. That would be great. Any nays, objections, abstentions? You're going to abstain?
Yep.
Because you weren't here for the meeting, obviously. Do you want to do that also, Amber? Okay. So we have 2 abstentions, and everybody else is in favor, so the meeting minutes pass. Thank you very much. That's a great start. So next, we would like to turn it over to council for a legislative update to the Procurement Council.
Good morning. I'm just going to give you an update on a couple of bills right now that are moving right now through the legislature. The first one is Assembly 6355, Senate 3984A. It's amending the state finance law, the education law, the public authorities law, and the economic development law regarding the controller's oversight over SUNY, CUNY, and OGS centralized contracts. Also affects contracts through state-affiliated not-for-profits, and it creates some additional ethics requirements for state procurement officials and state procurements. Currently, the Senate bill was amended on the 3rd reading on May 22nd. The Assembly bill still has to be amended. It was March 3rd, was referred to the Governmental Operations Committee. Assembly 3265 and Senate 270, which amends the executive law to create the equal pay disclosure with respect to state contracts, require state contractors to disclose data on employees' compensation by gender, race, and ethnicity and other relevant data, and establishes various reporting requirements. The Assembly bill on May 4th was advanced to the 3rd reading, and the Senate bill on January 4th was referred to the Finance Committee. Next one is Assembly 2022, same as Senate 383, which amends the state finance law to require agencies prior to entering into a contract for consulting services of more than $750,000 to compare costs to determine whether the work could be performed at a lower cost by state employees. That on the Assembly bill on May 4th was advanced to the third reading. The Senate bill on January 4th was referred to the Finance Committee. The next bill we have is Assembly 2185 and Senate 3918, which amends the state finance law and the agricultural and markets law to establish the Buy from the Backyard Act, to require state agencies that purchase food and food products to purchase 20% of their total contracts from foods within the New York State. The Assembly bill on January 17th was referred to the Agricultural Committee, and the Senate bill on May 24th was advanced to the second reading. The last bill we have for report is Assembly 6832 and Senate 5096, which amends the state finance law with respect to various clarifications relating to preferred sources. That bill, the Assembly bill on the March 21st was referred to the Governmental Operations Committee, and the Senate bill was advanced to the third reading on May 8th. And that's the current status of some legislation.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So what we'd like to do today is we have a couple of items that are up for discussion, and then some updates and some other procedural items. Does anybody have an objection to us moving the resolution regarding application submission time up on the agenda so that it can be closer to the front? We'll do the discussion on spill kits first, and then that application, and then some of the more procedural items. Does anybody have an objection to modifying the agenda that way? No? Okay, great. So what we'd like to do first is we have an application from NYS for approval of the commodity spill kits. And is Joe here? Joe, are you going to speak to it? Do you want to, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Messina. I'm the Vice President of Sales with NYS. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present the application for approval for a 30-gallon universal spill kit and a 55-gallon oil spill kit. I want to provide some context. This application falls somewhat outside of the norm for a Procurement Council review. Originally, we had submitted this application back in July 1st of 2016, seeking approval from OGS under their authority provided by the Council because the anticipated volume of business was expected to be well less than $500,000. We determined our application to be within 10% of prevailing market price. So when OGS attempted to move the application forward for approval, it was met with objection by Empire State Development because of the potential negative impact to New York State businesses here. And while we certainly understand and appreciate ESD's role in government, we have to respectfully disagree with the assertion that this application, predicated on such insignificant volume, would have any type of negative impact on a significant number of New York businesses. So with that being said, you know, Liberty, our performing member here, part of Montgomery County ARC, has been performing and providing commodities, you know, through NYS in the Preferred Source Program for nearly 4 decades. They have a proven track record of performance in producing oil-absorbent type products, the mats themselves, the blankets. So moving towards a kit, the impetus of which was based on inquiries from potential state agency customers, initiated their action to submit and put forth this application to do some of the cutting, the packaging, assembly, and ultimate distribution of the kits to end users. We certainly appreciate OGS's recommendation, favorable recommendation for approval with respect to this application and meeting the major criteria of the preferred source program, including price, added value labor, and actually and I don't want to speak too much on their behalf, but as part of their review referenced the centralized contract for industrial and commercial equipment and supplies, which demonstrated our price to actually be far below the awarded price for similar or like products. I've also downloaded the actual awarded contractors on that centralized contract for group number 39,000, and on their list were 2 MWBEs, one of which was headquartered in New Jersey, and one of which, Watts International, is in Poughkeepsie, New York. So when ESD issued their memorandum opposing the approval of such application, they cited the potential negative impact to 2 minority or women-owned businesses, 2 of which I contacted or actually reached out to their website. And spill kits are just one of a multitude of either services or commodities in their respective portfolios. So I don't know, I know our application cited an estimated dollar volume annually of 10,000. OGS did some further review and uncovered it to be just shy of 17,000 annually, which I still deem to be a fairly insignificant dollar amount. But nonetheless, we view any employment outcome, no matter how small or sporadic, to be a good one, which is why we just felt that this was a natural progression to Liberty's existing product line and, fulfilling the demands of existing state agency customers. I would say that we had to turn away an offer for this product from a state agency whom I won't mention at this meeting, and they were kind enough to share the purchase order that they issued to the contractor. In this case was Granger. So we don't see how the approval of this application is going to have a negative economic impact on any New York State business or MWBE for that matter. Do want to mention too that as part of the supply of raw material in the chain of production of this product comes from a company called Fremont Industrial, based in Westbury, New York, which is Long Island. So we have reached out and continue to support business with New York State companies. I also brought with me here to extrapolate a little more in terms of the benefits to the individuals with disabilities that they serve. Dawn Jacksland, who's the Director of Business Development at Montgomery County ARC, to lend some additional insight to this application.
Hello, and thank you.
Could you just state your name and your organization so that we can record it for the record?
You bet. Dawn Jacksland, Director of Marketing and Sales for Liberty Enterprises, Montgomery County ARC. Thank you very much. Montgomery County ARC and Liberty have supported people in our community for 60 years. This is our anniversary year this year. 60 years supporting people in an area that's been economically depressed for almost all of those 60 years. If you come to Montgomery County, and specifically Amsterdam, you'll see there's not a lot of opportunity there for many people, let alone people with disabilities. It's a rural area. There's not public transportation. So even if you had an opportunity to work, most likely without someone like Liberty, you wouldn't have the transportation and the means to get back and forth to that job opportunity. When we looked at commodities and the opportunity that New York State gave us 30 years ago to manufacture commodities for New York State contracts, we knew this would be one of the only ways we would have to help the people we support in gainful employment. Our agency does nothing but commodities. that's what we've done. One of the major ones that we have is spill mats for New York State contracts for transportation. They come in by the truckload every week. They're cut into 7 different sizes depending on agency need and use. And we had one of those agencies come to us and say, you know what, we could really use spill kits. We know that you have these mats. And that's how we usually come up with ideas for line extensions for projects that we have. It's usually something that we do well, something that we have a good supply source, usually with New York State suppliers, and make a line extension out of that. That's what we're trying to do with this application. We're trying to take something that we do well and make it into another useful product. One of the things that we talk about at home is that we consider ourselves a small business. The difference that we are is that we employ 75% of our workforce is people with disabilities. There's not very many small businesses that can say that they do that. You as a council hold us to a very high standard. We must meet that market price, be within 10% of it. We try at all times to use New York State suppliers, and we have to, based on New York State law, have 75% of that labor with people with disabilities. We do that, and we do that every day, and we do it really well. So I hope you'll consider this application as something that we can continue to do and help our customers with products that they need. We realize that it is very small, but it is something. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So a procedural footnote for the new folks on the council. The council has delegated authority for approval of these kind of applications to OGS on a series of criteria. They have to be under $500,000. But there is a criteria that OGS and ESD agree before we approve them. So while this is a different volume than we normally see on the application, it is required because not all of the application requirements were met for OGS to use that delegated authority. So that should give some context. Are you all set?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if anyone had any questions relative to the application.
If we can, if people have questions during discussion, we'll allow you to answer them.
Okay.
Is that all right?
No, absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you.
So the other footnote is that from OGS's perspective, there are multiple roles OGS plays to the council. One of them is staff for the preferred sources or for other functions often have to report to the Procurement Council, which is separate from my role as chair and some of our staff members' role as staff to the council. So we make that distinction purely because there are different roles. We're going to ask OGS, the preferred sources reviewer, to share with us their recommendation on this application, and then we'll do this, extend the same courtesy to ESD. Okay.
Thank you. Based upon the application and our research and analysis, staff recommends that the Procurement Council approve NYSED application 1250-C and designate preferred source status to NYSED for 30-gallon universal spill kits, that's product D4848, and 55-gallon oil spill kits, product D4849. Staff findings. Based on the labor steps described in the application, OGS has determined that the value-added labor, manufacturing, producing, assembling, and packaging, meets the requirements of preferred source guidelines, section B, 1 through 3. OGS also finds the proposed price is below the prevailing market price for comparable products found in OGS contract PC 67235 with W.W. Granger under the Industrial Equipment and Supplies Award. Third, this application is for 2 commodities, 2 items. No service offerings are included in this request for approval. And finally, spill kits similar to the items proposed by NYSED have been available under OGS centralized contracts for many years. Annual sales under New York State centralized contract have averaged approximately $16,850 per year between 2012 and 2016. I'm not going to cover the three-part test because that's already been addressed. But the third step would have been the application would have had to have been reviewed by ESD and approved. Included in the materials that were sent to the council, an ESD memo from October of 2016 was provided to the council. In the memo, ESD objected to the application, citing potential impact to New York State small businesses. The most recent update that we received from ESD was on May 30 of 2017, and that was that ESD does not approve the application. Some more application information. Market scope. NYSED estimates first-year sales at approximately $10,000. Likely purchasers include New York City Transit, MTA. Upon approval, the products would be available as a preferred source offering to purchasers across the state. Market value is expected to increase as new customers are identified. Participation by preferred sources. NYSED has estimated on the value-added labor statement included in their application that 10 or fewer employees will provide direct labor for these commodities. NYSED also estimates that annual spill kit production will require 97.86 direct labor hours, 73.4 of which will be direct disabled labor. The disabled labor ratio is expected to be 75% in their first year of production. I'm sorry? Okay, and so finally, NYSED has provided sufficient information to allow the OGS preferred source team to confirm that the prices proposed are below prevailing market prices. The price for the 30-gallon universal spill kit would be $172.64, and for the 55-gallon oil spill kit, $303.61.
Thank you, John. And in the same vein, if people have questions, any of the speakers on this application will be available during discussion. If you have specific questions for them, I believe OGS's recommendation is also in front of you, so if you have questions about the details, they're included in there. And then, so from a personal standpoint, I also want to clarify that there is a reason why there are two different views of this and two different approaches to this application. One looks at the content of the application and what has been provided, and one looks at the economic impact in New York State. So it is relevant. Even when there's disagreement between agencies, it's not direct conflict. It's because we're looking at different things. So I just want to be careful to not portray this in any other way other than that. Chris, can we go to you for a discussion of this issue?
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to move my ability to speak to Beth Warren.
So, for folks that haven't been here, there's a procedural mechanism that Chris can yield her time to another speaker, and so what we'd like to do, and so I think in the same way that Liberty was able to speak, that's what's happening here also. But for the record, would you please give us your name, your organization, and then if you could go on with your comments, that would be great.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Beth Warren. I'm an AVP at Empire State Development in the Community Economic Development Group. Okay. I need these to read, but I need these to see. So anyway, so ESD, has been said, is we're looking at the landscape of the spill kits and how they relate to the small business, and so we can fully understand the implications of this application and how it will impact small businesses. And Currently, our initial research indicates that there is an impact on these small businesses, and we feel it would be imprudent to move ahead without a full analysis. It's a lot to unpack, and we're working with other state agencies to get the full picture. I know it's been stated that we think the estimated sales are $10,000, and then it was $16,850 for the past couple of years with OGS. I just want to note that that was through the centralized contracts. That's not through discretionary spend or open purchase marketing, or open market purchasing, sorry. And there are at least 6 state agencies that will purchase spill kits. And so if you just did quick back of the envelope math, $10,000, 6 agencies, that's about $1,500 an agency. And that just doesn't make sense to us that's the volume of the sales for the entire state of New York, knowing what spill kits do. And so we're just requesting more time to fully investigate and get a better sense of the landscape and understand how small businesses would be impacted.
Could
Okay.
I have the opportunity to respond to that?
No.
No?
Sorry. We can address those things in question. So if you have somebody you want to share that question with, we can do that. But so the procedure and the process now is that this is for discussion for the council. So we can do this a couple of ways. Normally we would have some sort of motion that we would be discussing, but if we want to have a general conversation about the subject first, and then so the potential motions here are, I think it sounds like from ESD's perspective, to have more time would be a motion to table. There can be a motion to approve, a motion to disapprove. All of those are options to this body, and all of them would require discussion and then would require a vote. So does anybody want to have general discussion, or does anybody rise to any motion?
Question.
Charlotte. Okay, so let's do some general discussion first. Is that okay with everybody? Just for a few minutes? Okay, Charlotte.
Charlotte Davis, Controller's Office. I'd like to ask ESD, what have you done so far to actually get that data? Have you actually asked the agencies for the amount of spill kits that they buy?
We'll just assume the floor is yielded to whoever is going to answer the questions, Chris or Beth. If you could, yeah. And if questions are directed to anybody else, if you could go back to the mic also, that would be great.
Sure. Okay. Hi. Oh, okay. Yes, so we've reached out to, so we've looked at a couple of ways of doing this, and we've looked at, we've talked to folks that we know who purchase spill kits, such as DOT and Thruway, and where there's some, I think the devil is in the details here. It's the spill kits are broad, right? And these are looking at 30 and 55 gallons. So trying to distill the actual sale of the 30 and the 55 gallon spill kits. And so that's we know that there's this universe, and we're trying to understand that specific number, like what that size and scope of those are. And we haven't drilled down to that level of data yet, and that's why we're requesting the motion to table so we can get that data. We've also looked at the OSC's frequently purchased commodities directory, and where it identifies, like the agencies that spend X amount of money in different categories, so reaching out to them. So, and we've also looked at some of the firms and some of the contracts and where they were awarded to, and have done the same as NYSID, looking at general research on the businesses that operate in this space, and making calls and talking to some of the businesses.
What I'm trying to get at is really timing. Where are you along in this process? Do agencies owe you something by next week? What?
Agencies owe us something. I don't want to misrepresent. It is something that we've been sort of asking, and we want to be able to kind of wrap this up, so that we can have the full analysis and reach our conclusion. So I would hope that we would be able to hear from them within the next couple of weeks, is my sense. That's what we're trying for.
As you ask questions, please also state your name in advance.
Hi, David Russo, Office of Mental Health. You might want to stay. Regarding the MWBE firms that offer this product, have you reached out to them to see what their sales have been to get that data?
Yes, we have.
So
And one of the, and so this is just, you want to, I think we feel like we're scratching the surface and we just want to be able to investigate a little further. One of the companies that we spoke to, their sales represent 50% of the estimated $10,000 in sales that we think that is being stated as the possible amount that would be purchased a year. So if one MWBE firm is selling half of that, that gives us pause.
So, I mean, just looking at the application was submitted in July of 2016. So at what point in time was this information provided to ESD to do this review?
Well, originally we had, and I think it was the end of October, we had issued our first response where we had we disapproved the application, and then it came back to us this past fall, winter, and so we've been investigating that since then.
But based upon your initial, in October though, wouldn't you have already had to have that information before you?
Can you speak up, please?
Yep. So based upon your analysis in October to deny or not approve the recommendation, so wouldn't have this analysis have already been done?
Yes, we were looking to get more data, and so one of the challenges also is that there's not a NAICS code for spill kits because NAICS code is industry, and so a lot of different vendors and businesses categorize these things differently, and so it's working within that landscape and trying to put together all the pieces so that we can get that full picture that accurately portrays what's happening on the street for these small businesses and with state agencies. And so we've been diligent, and we need some more time to be able to do that, and knowing that we've looked everywhere and have asked all the right questions to get a sense of the actual marketplace and the businesses that are working within it.
And just as a point of personal privilege for the folks in the back of the room, the air conditioners are on today, which we're all very appreciative of. But you do need to speak a little louder into the microphones today to be heard for the public in the back. Okay. Tom?
Tom Hipshin from SUNY. I'm just trying to understand. So in October, it was disapproved, but now you're asking for additional time?
Right. In October, we had issued the memo saying we disapproved. NYS came back asking us to relook at it. So we're doing this a deeper dive to be able to sort of point to the fullness of the landscape and of the businesses that would be impacted. And our initial research at this point is that there would be an impact, and so we want to make sure that we're looking at it sort of the whole picture and really digging in and getting the level of details that we know. I mean, it just seems if we have these 6 state agencies that are buying these goods, and if we're saying it's a $10,000 sale, or if it was $16,850, that's about $3,000 a state agency, and it just the math doesn't make sense to us, and so that's why we think that there's a market that's happening that's outside of the centralized contracts that are either through discretionary spends that we can fully understand what we're dealing with.
Well, the order of precedence is people should be buying from the centralized contract first, so there wouldn't be discretionary spend unless they're not following state finance law.
Well, there's also the form function. I mean, centralized contract is where it starts, but
Right.
To say that that's all of it doesn't seem.
And you say there's
appropriate.
six entities.
There's at least 6 entities.
Okay. So what information were you using to disapprove in October? What?
So we look at if there is a impact on small businesses and also on MWBEs.
No, I understand it, but what information did you have? I guess it's piggybacking on what David was asking. What information did you have in October that led you to disapprove the application?
Because we knew that there were a number of businesses that were in this space. I think there was 10 businesses, 4 of which were MWBE certified, and 5 of which sell to New York State agencies. And those agencies, those businesses employ 184 people. And so what we're trying to understand is the extent of the Joe is correct that some of these companies, that they don't just sell spill kits, they sell other items within that general field of supplies for cleaning up these types of things. So we're trying to get to the level of detail to say, okay, you sell to state agencies, what's the percent? We want to get to the nitty gritty so that we can make an informed decision, and one that we think accurately portrays the situation.
And the MWBs and the small businesses, were they resellers on the centralized contract?
I didn't hear you.
Are they resellers on the centralized contract? I know that.
Not that,
like Watts
not that
is-
I can tell.
I know Watts sells off of Granger. I was wondering.
No,
Okay.
but they mentioned Granger, and so we're looking at that as well because, Granger also does work with some smaller business and with MWBE. So I'm trying to understand that piece too.
Charlotte Davis, Controller's Office. I'd just like to make an observation. State agencies and OGS are pushing NYSED hard to be more timely with their pricing, and I think we owe them the same courtesy.
Okay, are there any other general comments? Sorry, Mary Beth.
Mary Beth Hefner from the Department of Health. I'm just questioning, one of the things mentioned earlier was that one of the MWBEs currently providing these is a New Jersey firm. So do we know, is that the firm that's providing the majority, the $5,000 worth?
Does anybody know the answer to that question?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is they weren't referenced on your particular award. The award you used in your recommendation was for Granger exclusively. So the Linden, New Jersey-based company, I couldn't speak to what, if anything, they sell under that centralized contract.
Okay, and I have 2 more quick questions for ESD. So I think it sort of piggybacks on what Charlotte just said. We're coming up on a year since the application has been submitted. So what would ESD think is a reasonable amount of time that they should have to review an application?
What was the reasonable amount of time that?
So it's been almost a year. It's like 4 weeks away from being a year that this application was submitted. I'm not sure when you actually got it, but I'm just curious as to how long the ESD would need to review an application.
In general, or this one specifically?
In general.
I mean, I believe that we generally are when we get those requests that we process them. Chris, I'm gonna look to you for just a quick second. That I think we typically do those within the time frame that is generally allotted for these. This was one again that we met the first deadline, right? And we disapproved it, and then we were asked to relook at it, and so that's what we're doing. I think all of these. I also just want to say for the record, as far as my involvement with this. There's only one other time that we have disapproved a NYSED application. I mean, we also support that mission. So I please don't take our wanting to do this due diligence as anything other than just wanting to make sure we have all of the facts and are looking at everything and taking the current landscape into account, into consideration as we do our own level of analysis. And some of them are a little more straightforward and some are a little more tricky because, again, if it's if you're looking at a service that is maybe more easily able to pull data and info from, then that helps us be quicker in our response.
So that sort of leads right into the next question, which is what amount of impact would be too much impact on another business for you to not support an application? Because I would have to assume that every action has some impact.
True. So I think, if we have in the same way when if it's a small amount for, say for NYSID and it's going to be at $10,000, those are jobs. I mean, it's the same, we have the same trigger, right? It's like that still has an impact on these businesses. I know that the federal government, has a threshold and a percentage. That's not the state doesn't have that protocol in place. So if a small business is going to be impacted, meaning that they're going to lose business that goes to the state, that's enough.
So any impact on a small business?
I'm hesitant to put a dollar value on that, just because I think, a lot of it is if you have a $10,000, again, marketplace, and a company is going to lose, a $5,000 contract, that's not maybe a lot of money, but for that in that particular marketplace, that's significant. So I think all of it, the larger context of what you're looking at, it matters. And so that, again, is what we're trying to drill down to understand this marketplace, the agencies that buy it and the vendors from whom they buy it, so that we can make this assessment. This is a lot more complicated. On the face, it's very straightforward, but unpacking it and getting to the level of detail that we need so that we can accurately represent these small businesses and WBEs has been a time-consuming endeavor, and one that we're committed to doing correctly.
David?
So related to that, you said the one companies would be potentially impacted by $5,000. Do you know what the total sales of that company are? In comparison to what their total sales are, what the impact of that $5,000 would be?
So that's the piece that we're further investigating right now.
Okay. Are there any other... I'm sorry.
Hi, Lisa Davis from OPWDD. When were you asked a second time around to review this? So I understand that you said no in October. When were you approached to provide additional support or opinion on this issue?
I think it was maybe in November, December?
Yeah, the timeline, as I recall it, is October or November. We were approached by OGS because at that time we wanted it to go before the council because of ESD's objection. So we agreed to not submit at that time to further afford additional time for review. However, at this point in time, we feel that sufficient time was granted and the action or the application should be voted on and
Okay.
on its own merits.
So to clarify, about November?
November, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so in the absence of general questions, the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Can I?
Do you want to... I'm sorry, David.
I just want to, so when I first were reviewing this, I had staff go out and reach out to see what the prices were on the OGS contract. 'Cause again, in the future, that would probably be helpful for the council to kind of have a comparison when you're saying this is on an OGS contract. So based upon the review that we did through the Granger contract and through one of their subs, the price of the 30-gallon was like $2.99. NYSID's proposing $1.72. And then on the 55-gallon, the OGS price was $4.19. The NYSID price is $3.03. So substantially lower the NYSID offering than what's on OGS contract. Just put in context, because that wasn't part of the information provided.
And so I apologize if it wasn't, David. That was our expectation, was that was part of our review and included in there. But so we've got relatively the same number when you reviewed it. The price proposed is $172.64 for the 30-gallon, and the OGS unit price is $218. And then the 303.61 for the 55-gallon is the proposed price, and 359.20 is the OGS price. So I apologize. I thought that that was in the material. If it's ever not in the material, our expectation is it should be. So the council should feel free to ask questions even in advance to staff. Okay. So again, are there any motions to act on this, to table it, to do any variety of what's available?
This is Phil Geltner from Ag and Markets. I move that we approve the OGS recommendation.
Sorry, could you?
This is Phil Geltner from Ag and Markets, and I recommend that we move to approve the vote to approve the OGS proposal, a recommendation.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table to approve. Is there a second?
I second. Tom Hipchen, SUNY.
Tom Hipchen from SUNY. There's a second. Okay, discussion. Is there anybody who wants to discuss in favor of or against approval as part of this process?
I make a motion to table it so we can have a little bit more time to research.
Okay, so
I believe, don't we have to wait till the one motion is finished?
we do.
before a new
So
motion?
let's walk through the process. So we have a motion, we have a second on the table for that motion. The folks that made the motion can withdraw it so we could consider another motion, or we can discuss it and vote on it. And then depending on the outcome of that vote, we can consider another motion. So right now we're at the point where, since the motion was just made, I'll offer you the opportunity. Do you have any interest in withdrawing the motion?
No.
Okay. In the absence of that, then we're open for discussion. And
But
depending
discuss
on
the motion,
how this
yeah.
comes through, then we can consider that motion also. Is there anybody who wants to speak in favor of the motion or against the motion to approve this application? Nobody at all? Charlotte?
Charlotte Davis, OSC. I would like to speak in for the motion. With all due respect to ESD, I think they had enough time to get the data that they needed. I think if they needed data from the small businesses that would be impacted, those small businesses would be very happy to give that data quickly. And, you know, I don't see any reason to delay it at this point.
Chris, do you want to speak against that motion? Or do you want to yield to speak against the motion?
I would like to yield my ability to speak to Beth.
Thank you. You know, we would like to sort of be able to come in here and say we either approve or disapprove with having full information. And so we have data from these MWBEs and small businesses who say they make sales to state agencies. So, and if you were to look up at the math, what we currently are told and what they sell, it's not making sense. And so that's why we believe that there is another sort of layer of data that we need to understand so we can fully appreciate the full scope of the landscape and the market. You know, if the market is bigger, then there is likely bandwidth to support a competitive marketplace so that these firms and NYSID can compete for these products. And if in fact it's a smaller marketplace, we don't want to disadvantage one group over another. And so we are just asking for the time to be able to fully understand the marketplace. There are some challenges. We're doing our best to get that data. And so where we are is what I've said up to this point.
Okay, thank you. So, Sean, do you want to ask your question? And then I have misspoken procedurally, and I want to correct that also after you have a chance to make your comment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing up a volatile issue on my first board meeting. Appreciate that. Question, though, is if this motion is approved, is this concrete in place forever, or is there subject to review if something compelling comes up in the future, some new information that we haven't heard yet? or in fact ESD or someone else comes up and says, look, we missed this the first time around, you really need to take a look at it. Is there a review process?
Okay, so let me address several things. Technically, and so I misunderstood the order of precedence of motions. We're looking at the instructions. A motion to table can be considered during this discussion, so I apologize for misrepresenting that. That was just my error, and I apologize for that. Let's go back to answering your question first, and then if there is consideration of that, we can move forward with that, because I can't ignore a motion like that on the table, and I shouldn't have done that, so I apologize. The other answer to your question is there is some issue with once approved as a preferred source item, it's approved as a preferred source item, and it's approved going forward. Typically, the expectation is we find those things out before we make the approval. Is there any way to undo it? No. Okay, so again, I confirm there is not a mechanism for unapproving an item. So there is some question of, acting on it now and discovering something later will be at our own risk as the council. Whereas right now there's some parity because everything would be subject to being competed. But at the same time, typically when everything is competed, there's not an opportunity for individuals with disabilities. So there is a challenge there that I would put out. So, having made a procedural error, Tom, if you have a question or a comment.
Just to piggyback, there is a mechanism to have it removed. The preferred source could ask to have it removed from their offering, but the board, the Procurement Council cannot remove it. But if we were to approve it, NYSA could say we want to remove that from our preferred source offerings, just to clarify.
Okay. So, again, I apologize to the council. This happens so rarely that I was misinformed about the order this happens in. So, I'm explaining it to myself as much as I'm explaining it to you guys. There's a main motion on the table to approve. It is correct in this process to consider a motion to table as a subsidiary motion. What would happen there is we would consider that motion, which requires a motion and a second, and then we would vote on the subsidiary motion if we had one, and then we would come back to the main motion about this, assuming that a motion to table was unsuccessful. So that is how it worked. If the motion to table was successful, it would be moved to the next meeting. If the motion to table was not successful, we would come back to discussion. It does not automatically get approved. We would come back and have to vote again on the motion to approve. Was that confusing enough for everybody? Okay.
One
Jerry.
question. If we were to move forward and approve, we're basically approving 2 lots.
Yes.
Under the preferred source, does that have the ability to automatically expand to all the rest of the sizes that are in those other lots? In other words, are we locking up this whole business now by just doing the 2 smaller lots, or what?
Let me find out. Hold on a second. So the procedure is that there would have to be a request for a product line extension. In the past, it has been very typical for OGS to approve those project line extensions naturally as part of this process. We could certainly consider how to manage that in this situation, but just historically, product line extensions have been something that we've approved pretty easily.
I have a question.
Yes.
So do you seek ESD input on product line extensions?
We do not typically.
I didn't know if I can ask Joe to speak on behalf of...
So, Joe, you were speaking on behalf of the item, on behalf of the application. So, for everybody's understanding, if there's a seated council member in the room who has a vested interest in this, they're not allowed to participate. So I'm trying to find a balance here to make sure that all perspectives are shared. So Joe, if you have something you want to say about the application, that would be great, but not about the discussion, the motion to approve. It's a fine line, I get that, but I'm trying to find the balance to allow participation here.
Yeah, no, I mean, excuse me, what I wanted to say was that OGS has done an excellent job over the past several years in terms of continuing to educate state agency customers in terms of the hierarchy or the procedural aspect of the program, and that's preferred source, centralized contract, and the like. In this case, I think we've demonstrated that when we were approached, the procuring agency went to the centralized contract and purchased from an entity that was neither a small business nor an MWBE. And you know, under the discretionary, and I think that's why OGS and the council has approved commodities in the past in terms of the sandbox being big enough to allow everyone to participate. I wish I could say unequivocally that we get 100% of the market share on every offering we have on the list. That's anything but the case. And to Beth's point, I'm pretty sure there are state and local agencies out there using that discretionary threshold to meet their objectives and goals in terms of supporting the MWBE initiatives out there. So I guess the last thing I would say is if an application of this size, which is really a niche product that we don't see of having significant you know, employment opportunities here, I don't know how anything going forward is going to get through the council because of the mentioning before of there being some type of impact to a business entity in New York State or elsewhere. So that's it.
I have a question
Okay.
about the procedure.
Yep.
We had the motion to approve the OGS recommendation.
Yep.
And then we found out that we have now a subsidiary motion on whether to table, and seeing as we didn't have a second on that, did that fall off the table, so to speak? Or did it?
So let me do this. We have a main motion on the table. I misspoke about the procedure, which means I didn't give the motion to table the opportunity to get a second. So I would consider that again as a secondary motion. Chris, if you wanted to make that motion to table, we would absolutely consider that. And then we would look for a second for that motion. Again, totally on me, I apologize. We will get everybody a set of these rules, including me, so that we have them in front of us for the future. Okay? Chris, do you want to motion again?
I motion to table this.
Okay. So Chris has a motion to table. Does the motion to table have a second?
Joel Lombardi, ITS, I'll second.
Okay. So the way this works now is we have to discuss the motion to table. Is anybody in favor of or against tabling and want to speak on those subjects? David.
David Russo, OMH. So it looks like NYS had delayed this application previously to give ESD and everybody time to do this analysis. I mean, we had a meeting back in February, which could have been brought to the council, which it wasn't. So, I mean, at this point, we're in the end of May. I would think that would have been sufficient time. And I'm still kind of confused as to when ESD initially decided not to approve the application back in October or November as to what the rationale was or what the documentation was behind that to make that determination. Because if they would have approved it, OGS would have approved it, and it wouldn't have come to the council.
That's correct. And in an effort to resolve this issue, I did approach NYSID and ask for the courtesy of that extension to this meeting. So I can confirm that part. Are there any other comments?
I'd like to speak to the question of whether to table. With all due respect to ESD's efforts to make sure that small businesses have an opportunity to compete on a fair and equal basis, given that we're nearly at a year into this, I think that in terms of the public's expectations on our making decisions as an effective government, that we're just taking too long to make this decision. And therefore, I say we should not table it and that we should move to approve the OGS recommendation.
Okay.
I would
I would piggyback onto that. When asked in multiple different ways about how they would about their timeline and what is a reasonable amount of time, ESC didn't have an answer on to when they would even be wrapping this up, or, how long it would be to get more data.
And so for the folks taking the meeting minutes, that was Amber Mooney. Just if we could, before you speak, that would be great.
Hey, Steve Casarda. I just want to point out that if we make a decision based on that they, for lack of a better word, acquiesced on getting the information we needed, we're making a conscious decision that we're putting form over substance. We, as Mr. Russo correctly says, he doesn't understand how they reached their decision back in October, was it? We sit here today, we don't know the information. So we're making a conscious decision to say, because we didn't get the information at this point, that we're going to vote in favor of this, not knowing what the effect is. So I just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte, I know you had your hand up, and then I don't know if I've seen other hands or not, but go ahead.
I'd just like to say that I know that OGS doesn't make these recommendations lightly. I know they do the research, and they are the state's procurement experts. So I don't see any reason not to go with their recommendation, especially in light of the fact that this has been delayed so much, and the next Procurement Council meeting isn't for 4 months.
Chris, do you want to yield? I think Beth might fall out of her chair.
No, I promise I won't. So I just want to, if I didn't explain it properly, I'd like to have the chance to explain it. Part of the reason why this has been a challenging to unpack and do this full analysis is when, we did research on the New York State Contract Reporter for ads. We've, looked at sales through from businesses that have gotten it through certified firms. And, if you look at NAICS codes and if you look at product descriptions, the way that the items are sold, it is very inconsistent. Sometimes it's called like janitorial spills, industrial supplies. And so and the more we uncover that there's this terminology, then we learn there's this terminology, and then there's this terminology. And so we're trying to, again, gather all that information, because we firmly believe that the sum of all the parts are significant, and that we want to be able to, again, relay this information accurately. And so it's calling the state agencies, and then finding the person who does procurement, then getting them to find out the level of detail for spill kits, and then actually we need these specific spill kit sizes. And so getting return phone calls or having someone respond to your email is not, that's part of the delay and part of the process, and so we, to the degree that we can look in all the different, PTS or SFS and trying to get this information, we're doing that. But it is not as clean cut as one would expect. It is very complex, and we just don't feel we have, again, this size of the marketplace, the firms that are in this business, and then the sales to the state. And so we're just asking for that time, and we feel like we've broken through a logjam, and we're getting there. And if we could have that extra time to be able to do this analysis fully, and then we can come with a recommendation, whatever that may be.
Okay. Any other comments, Jerry?
Just so we're all clear, clearly the data was not gathered timely. One thing we all learned a few minutes ago, this is not these two groups. This is the whole group. So I'm one of those people who's always afraid of the unanticipated consequences. So in effect, all those other sizes and all those other companies that nobody here, to my knowledge, has any data on, are going to be impacted by what we do now if we vote yes. So just so you know, that's what we're doing. unless somebody has the data, in which case that refutes it all. But
Can I just answer that Jerry's response there? I mean,
It's not really a question.
But it's a clarification. It's relative to the application itself or future applications.
Is the council okay with this?
Can I yield my time?
Yes.
I
Thank you.
yield my
Tom.
time to Joe.
Once again, any future product size, configuration, what have you, would be put forth to OGS in the same premise here, and they would have the delegation to either approve or deny based on the merits of the application. It's not a blanket approval in any stretch.
Tom Epshin-Suni, just to clarify that in terms of Jerry's question now, or maybe it was Mary Beth, if there is a line item, you're not asking ESD for impact, right? If NYSED or any other preferred source goes and wants to do this, or I guess if NYSED were to ask for additional line items, you would not be asking ESD for impact?
I think the question's to us. In general, we have looked at product extensions as product extensions, not as new items. So if they were not a new commodity, they didn't go through the same process. However, if part of this discussion is to address the council's concern is that product line extensions in this vein would still have to go back to ESD, OGS would be open to that. As part of that, and we could certainly consider it as a larger discussion item about how product line extensions get reviewed in the future. But if that's helpful at all, those are instructions from the council that OGS would consider friendly instructions. We would certainly try to incorporate into our process. Is that fair?
Yes, I guess how would that? What's that process?
If we considered a product line extension a new application, it would have to go through the application process and be reviewed by ESD first. We would caution the council to consider not making that a broad edict without us being able to look at what the impact there would be. I'm not sure we want to make that decision for all commodities today, but if that's something that addresses this issue, we can certainly address it that way going forward, or address it as a mini new application that doesn't require all of the pieces but still has to go back to ESD for review.
I understand the concept, Mike. I guess I'm thinking procedurally. Are you saying that it would be a recommendation with this approval?
I think, if that was the tone and temperament, I think we would just take that as a takeaway, and I'm not sure we would require formal action.
Could we amend the motion? In other
You
words,
can if you wanted to make it
you amend
a
the
formal
motion to
action,
say
absolutely.
that
Yep.
we approve the OGS proposal with the proviso that any other size or quality have review as a new item.
So yes, we can do it. We have to get out of the tabling motion before you can amend the main motion.
Exactly. I'm just saying
And,
as
and I would encourage, if we're considering the tabling motion, I would encourage ESD to accept a friendly amendment that if the discovery comes out that this doesn't have an impact, that OGS could still approve this within its discretion between now and the September meeting. If Empire State Development discovered that this was not an issue, I think we would only want to hold it tabled for the next meeting if there really was an impact on businesses. If there wasn't one, we would want to consider the ability to just move forward if that was the outcome. So on the tabling motion, Chris, would you guys consider that a friendly motion and just include that?
Yes, we would.
Okay. So, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa from OPWDD, could we give a defined deadline then for that activity to take place?
You can, so that this body meets quarterly, and a tabled action would require us to bring this back up in September at the meeting. if we wanted to also impose a timeline on the review in case it's able to be approved. I'm not exactly sure what the mechanism would be for that, but I think we would have to entertain that as an amendment to the tabling motion.
Right. I apologize. That's where I was going. That if
Yep.
it's, if we could give them a timeline and then they turn out that it doesn't negatively impact their concerns, then it would go back to OGS to make the decision, because then ESD would say yes, and they would not have a problem
I guess
with it.
what would happen is there would no longer be a disagreement over the fourth criteria, which would mean that we could move forward in the absence of a meeting. If there was not agreement, I think as long as, so if the tabling motion is designed to encourage the vetting of this information and not encourage, I wouldn't want the tabling motion to be seen as trying to force them to agree if there really was a concern that they had. But other than that, I don't know how ESD feels about a timeline on that, and if they would accept that as a friendly motion, or we'd have to amend the motion to table. But we're in discussion on the motion to table anyway. Do you want to suggest a timeline for discussion, or I don't know if ESD is prepared to discuss that today?
Should we hear from
Charlotte?
I just like to say that I think the delays and the tabling and the fact that state agencies don't answer each other's emails, I mean, I think that's an insult to the council. I think it's a waste of our time in a very big way. And I think, I think we shouldn't table. I think we should just make a decision. And the next time we have a similar situation, ESD will be timely with their answer, or if they can't, we could talk about it before it gets on the agenda and make scheduling adjustments as necessary.
Okay.
Can we move the motion to table?
Yes. So moving the motion to table now calls us for a vote. So to be clear, a yes vote is a vote to table with the right now with the condition that if OGS and ESD end up agreeing to approve in the meantime between now and the next meeting, we can move forward with that, but it does not have a timeline attached to it for ESD's review. Okay? A no vote means, it signifies that you would prefer not to table this motion, and you would prefer to take a vote on the motion to approve, which we would go back to and consider. Does everybody understand what a yes and a no vote means here? Okay. So, on the motion to table, how many votes to approve? So, if you could keep your hands up for a minute, that would be great. We have ITS, DOB, ESD, and then Steve from legislative appointee and DOH. Was that easier than reading their names? Yes? Okay, please put your hands down. Folks opposed to the tabling. No votes on tabling. Okay. OMH, OPWDD, SUNY, I can't see your sign. Okay, Ag and Markets, Comptrollers, we have Sean, Sean, the new guy. Docs and Amber Mooney, legislative appointee, are all no's. So motion fails? Okay, so recusals. So we have NYSID and NYS and then, so can I get a count? I believe the motion to table fails, right?
5 to table, 8 opposed,
2 recusals. So the motion to table fails, which means we're not going to send we're not going to send this decision to September. We're going to now consider the main motion, which is a motion to approve. So in light of that, does anyone else want to?
Is this the time at which we would amend the motion to approve?
Yes.
With the proviso that we would have consideration of another size lot be considered as a new application?
Yes. So
We would have to vote on that amendment?
since you're the sponsor of the motion, you can actually just make that change to your
I
motion.
would like to do so.
Okay. So let me read it back to everybody, if I can. So the main motion was a motion to approve the application. It is now a motion to approve the application with the caveat that if there is a product line extension, the process has to be put in place for ESD to review that and review the economic impact of that product line extension before approval. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the reason I framed it that way is so that if there is a not complete application process that we can go through, but there's still a way to expedite that process, I'm going to have to consult with council, but if we can frame it that way we can do it in the most time expeditious way possible. Is that acceptable to the council?
That's my intention.
Okay. You okay with that? Okay.
Need a second?
All right, and we will include out that language in writing to the council in order to make sure that I didn't misunderstand it or misstate it. But so right now we have a motion as amended to approve with that caveat.
Second.
And we have I think we already have a second, but I think we have a second anyway.
You don't need to second the amendment because it's
Right,
a friendly
because it's a
amendment.
friendly amendment and it's from you. So that we're still in discussion. Does anybody want to speak in favor of or against this motion? Go ahead. I'm going to make an assumption that ESD is yielding.
Yes.
Okay.
I can't see her. Sorry.
I'll clarify that afterwards, yeah.
So, since there's no tabling, we object, based on our review of the likelihood of the negative impact on small businesses. We undertook the review at the request of NYSED and the chair to try to balance the interest of small business and NYSED. We are, we asked for a table, but absent that, we object and we vote no.
Okay. Thank you. And just clarification on the amendment, we're only addressing spill kits here with this new caveat, correct, right now, because it's part of the motion? If we want to have a
yes.
bigger discussion about this, we'll have it at another time?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, David.
So related to, so when ESD sends the memo saying they object to the request, in future emails or documentation to OGS, if they object, can they provide their documentation? I mean, because again, it's just a memo, it doesn't really give us any specifics to kind of have a context as to what the reason for the denial was.
So I would say sometimes we find opportunities to make process improvements out of difficulty, not just out of having the good idea. I think it's worth having that discussion. I think that process is not specifically codified in how this works. So how about OGS as staff to the council takes that as a takeaway about how to improve that reporting process? But it's not specifically germane to the approval. So
Right. Well, again, if we had that information, we can analyze a little bit more as to what their objection was. Again, and without just saying they object because small businesses provide the services and sell to state agencies, it really doesn't give us context as to the impact.
Okay. Thank you, David. Any other comments for or against this motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion to approve this application. All in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Okay. Can you see everybody, Patty? So, Amber, Mary Beth, Corecraft, right? I can't hear you, but OSC, Ag and Markets, SUNY, OPWDD, OMA, I'm sorry, my eyes are killing me, OMH, right? And then DOB. I apologize. You will be very excited after having held your hands up about something I want to talk about under new business. We're going to make this easier for everybody. You got everybody? Okay. Those opposed to the motion to approve? ITS, Empire State Development, and Steve, legislative appointee. Okay, did I miss anybody? No. Number of recusals? Sorry, abstentions. Sean, you're going to abstain. Number of recusals. We have the 2 recusals that normally come up in this program. All right. So hang on one second. Let me just understand. All right. So the rules of this council require they require a majority of the membership to pass any action. And I don't know that we've ever had this instance, but we've taken a vote to approve. And the vote is 9 in favor, 3 against, 1 abstention, with 2 recusals, which does not constitute 11 votes to pass, which means that that this application fails. Okay? In response to that, I know that there is an opportunity for the applicant to resubmit the application and to have it reconsidered, but the action of this council is that the approval fails.
What's the membership count?
Hang on a second. I'm still learning on the job too, so this is fairly complicated. So there is an appeals process for the applicant, and the appeals process is direct to the OGS commissioner. So that option is available, and so the motion to approve fails, and then the applicant is welcome to take advantage of that process if they want. Okay.
Question about that?
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
So when people are required to recuse themselves, right? I'm sorry. When people are required to recuse themselves, doesn't that become a no vote if you need 11 to pass? Because you're counting them in the total of members?
Yeah, so the challenge is we're actually counting even the unseated members. There's 21 members.
I get the math. But my point is, if you need 11 to approve, correct?
Yep.
And you have 2 people that recuse themselves because they're required to recuse themselves.
Right.
And doesn't that automatically become a negative connotation to the vote? Because they never can.
You're saying makes the whole body 19.
Makes the whole body 19. Listen, I voted no, but it is what it is. How do you justify? How do you make people recuse themselves and then say that those votes count as a total?
Give us a second.
Yeah.
Let us talk about that. Again, these are all items that have not come up, certainly in my tenure. And have they come up in anybody else's tenure on this council? Not in a long time. Okay, give me a minute. Let me see where we're at here.
But you're right. What if you had 6 people? So they can't vote, yes, for the things that are most important to them. And yet, their being on this council is a negative to their own. How does that work? Right. I know. It can't be. Back that out. Yeah. No, me neither. That comes a favor.
That means there's more disagreement. That's all that means. That's right. It's not. It's true.
Who's this one? Who's this one?
This was ESD. We have a big
Huh. For those of you that are new, we're trying to take you guys to the nicest places. We've actually staged this so that you can be excited about your participation.
Well done.
Well done. There we go. So OGS has staff that is staff to the council, staff to the Procurement Council, which includes legal counsel. And the review that Council SEL has done for the council, the Procurement Council, is that not only majority but quorum are both dependent on the entire membership of the body, regardless of whether they are eligible to vote on any particular item. I don't necessarily disagree with you on the concern that raises, and we'll bring that back to council. But based on the case law and the interpretation, right now a vote to approve would require 11 votes. So, Mary Beth.
So how many unseated positions do we have? We only had 3 no votes, correct?
That's
so
correct.
So if you have more than 1 no vote on anything, it will not pass, is what you're saying, mathematically.
So I believe we have 16 now. Almost everybody who's seated is here.
How many
We
non-seated?
either have 15 or 16. There's 21 council seats.
So we have 5
Empty
non-seated, 2 recusals, so 7. We have to overcome 7 votes
That's
for
correct.
anything to pass.
That's
I don't
correct.
think that's the way this council has been managed up till now, because we've never had to exceed by 7, have 7 more yes votes for something to pass than no votes, is what you're saying, for anything to
So-
pass.
I'm happy to look at the historical information. For the time that I have been here as chair, we've been looking for 11 votes to pass anything. We just haven't had anything that has been contended in this way to fall below 11 votes.
So I'm not even sure I remember how many no votes there were on this, but were there 3?
There were 3
There
no
were
votes.
3. So if more than one person votes no, everything will fail. That's the way that works right now. If more than one person
The
votes
number
no.
of people seated, right.
Does that seem logical or correct? That if more than one person votes no, everything will fail if you have one person.
I've found commenting on
Okay.
things that are legislatively imposed or structurally imposed as whether they're logical.
I'm just wondering
doesn't-
if we're misinterpreting or overinterpreting something. It just seems
I-
crazy that one vote, one person
I'm
controls
willing to
the
address
entire
it to
thing.
council again. I don't. More than that, I'm not sure I know the answer, but I will address it to council again. I know somebody else had a question also, and then I'll see if we can.
Although I understand that I'm not part of the discussion, I do want to voice my objection to recusal is just that, not a no vote. By the way this is being handled, my vote is a no, and I believe that's incorrect. When I agreed to recuse myself from these, I did not agree to vote no on everything that involved the disabled. Although I can appreciate the need to protect small business, I also find we need to create the balance to protect the disabled as well. We are also considering jobs for the disabled as well as we are considering jobs for small business. And there needs to be some balance. And I think waiting a year to provide jobs to the disabled is quite enough time.
Okay. Hang on one second.
I think that one is extra.
So we are double checking these rules. Does anybody need a drink of water? Quick bathroom break? Does anybody need a 5-minute recess while we discuss this? I was
Can we move
unprepared
on
for
to
this
other
problem.
parts of the agenda in the meantime?
We can go back to the so
Get further
so
things
let's do
down.
this. We have a result based on those rules. The concerns about the members have been addressed to council. If there is any change to those rules, we'll revisit this item. Otherwise, we'll move on the agenda until then.
And I just would add, I think this is probably the fullest I've ever seen this table.
Yep.
And we've had lots of things come up that had more than one no vote, and they've passed. So there's just something, I've never seen this table this full, so.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate that everybody is here, and I know how frustrating some of these procedural items can be, and I hope that doesn't turn you off from your excitement about being here, because we very much appreciate it. Okay, so council is going to continue looking at that.
Sean, I have a question. Chris McCann,
Who?
ESD, right here.
Oh, hi.
Can there be another motion to table this?
So right now it's been defeated. So it's not an active.
It's no longer, yeah. It's dead.
Sorry? As
Nothing. I
far
would
as
go
I know, we can't table something that's already been defeated, but we could. I think there's and I can go look it up. I think there's a mechanism where we could bring it back to the floor and
Sure.
vote again on it. But hold on a second.
Given the fact where we are now and the uniqueness of the count being the way it is it possible to have another vote so that everybody can take a look at it and say?
So I am in way over my head. If anybody has a concern, could we take a 5-minute recess? Let me not weigh in over my head on the procedural question there, and then we'll come back. So if folks want to use the comfort stations or they want to grab a drink, great. But please give me 5 minutes and let me see it. We'll start with Jerry's question in 5 minutes. Okay?
Move to suspend the
To all of the members of the council for your patience, as this is not there is a procedure for some of the things that are being discussed, but we didn't have it readily available to us, so we did have to look it up. So thank you for your patience. So this council has several options. The first option would be to motion to reconsider. So let's deal with the issues in order. The first issue is the issue of what constitutes majority. Okay, right now, our understanding under general obligations law is that majority for this body is 11. We have heard the concerns loud and clear. We will take those back to make sure there are not other ways to interpret that, or we'll make sure that we do a clarification for that, and we'll clarify to the council what those rules are. But today, that is the understanding of the rules put forth in the general obligations law. Having said that, this council now has options. The first option is to motion to reconsider, the effect of which would be to start over. Why would we do that? We would do that because we now have some concern about what majority is and what the impact of that would be. We could reconsider that. So I have it right here if anybody wants to see it. Our understanding of the rules is that someone from the prevailing side has to motion to reconsider. So in this case, someone who voted no has to vote to reconsider. Before we go down that path, let me also make a couple clarifications and a couple of make sure we know all of our options. The first clarification is, on these subjects, if a subject affects you directly, like a preferred source definition would affect all of our preferred sources, in that case, you would be required to recuse. If an application does not affect a scope of work that you work on, you would not have to recuse yourself from this vote. Okay, so that's one clarification. Should another vote come up on this subject, should it be reconsidered, if you're not actively pursuing an application and you don't already represent that commodity or that service, you would not have to recuse yourselves. Does anybody have any other questions before I give the other options of the impact of either an abstention or a recusal? Sure.
Because I was whispering. I'm sorry. So assuming you guys go back and you determine that what you said today is correct, and I assume that you will, does this board have any ability to change the rules for itself?
I think that's going to be one of the things we're going to review is it a statutory interpretation? Is it something that we have the ability to set rules for? Either way, we'll come back and we'll clarify that question. I think it's really important in light of how this played out to think about how those rules impact the operation of this council. And I think that's going to take more than a 5 or whatever, however long recess that was. So certainly if we did it incorrectly, we could go back and attempt to address that issue. I think we are fairly confident in the interpretation, but certainly we're willing to revisit it again and look at how we mitigate those impacts. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not asking if you come back and discover that you got it wrong. I actually don't think you got it wrong. I did some quick Googling.
Okay.
I don't think you got it wrong. But if you got it right, what options are there for us to change what right is? Can we decide that, for example, can we have a vote at some point and decide that a majority of a quorum is
So
what is needed?
my fear is that if it's in general obligations law, that we may not have the ability to change it other than through legislation, but we will answer that question completely for the next meeting.
Okay, because otherwise, essentially, this council has really no way to go forward.
I don't disagree with you on any front. We have had this conversation internally a number of times. So, in terms of other options, so this council can motion to reconsider. The applicant that came before us, where the application has been, the current state is the application has been denied. They can avail themselves of the appeals process. So we're not, and then we're not sure what the mechanics would be about, submitting again for this commodity or going through that process. We're going to have to sort that out. We're not sure whether that is an option or not yet. Once a commodity, there would have to be some difference in the application that brought it back here. So we have to think about that process. The answer is not no on that, but there may be an option for that. With that said, are any actions this council wants to take? Yes, Steve.
So, I know we talked a little bit in the break. So, if everybody's, no problem. So, hypothetically, make a motion to reconsider, right? After it gets seconded, whether we take a vote or not take a vote, hypothetically it's all the same, we're still in the same boat. But over the next months, I guess you're going to go and look at what we could do to deal with the problem of this vote, correct? So if there is anything. So hypothetically, if we made a motion to reconsider, it was seconded, and then someone made a motion to table, it could be tabled to next session while that issue gets dealt with. And then that also, strangely enough, gives EDS a time to get their information in. And it prevents NYSID from having the problem of a new application.
Those things are all correct. And so the process would be a motion for reconsideration, a second, a vote, which would then allow us to reconsider, and then it would be as if there was a new motion on the table, and it could be either voted on or tabled. First, making the first go round just for practice.
And you need somebody that had a no vote to make that motion?
The instructions are that someone on the prevailing side, which in this case is a no vote, would have to make that motion.
I make my motion to reconsider.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a second? There is a second from Mike Elmendorf. Before we get into discussion, Charlotte had her hand up for discussion, so I'm going to do that, and then we can do discussion on the motion to reconsider. Sorry.
A point of order. Do we need to vote on the motion to reconsider?
I believe we do. Yes. Hold on one second.
Well, what if I make a motion to table? They can't.
I'm trying to keep them all straight. You don't want a motion to table your motion to reconsider. You want to have your motion to reconsider be successful to bring the main motion back to table that.
I apologize for my shortcomings.
My question was not actually about the motion. I was just going to ask you, for the sake of the newer folks on the council, if you could remind us what the appeals process entails.
Sure. We don't do this very often either, so we're going to make sure that we address it. All right. So what I'm about to read appears in State Finance Law 162 3B. In the event that the State Procurement Council shall deny any such application, the commissioner or not-for-profit or nonprofit making agency which submitted the application may, within 30 days of such denial, appeal the denial to the Commissioner of General Services, who shall review all materials submitted to the State Procurement Council with respect to such application, and who may request such further information or material as is deemed necessary. Within 60 days of receipt of all information or materials deemed necessary, the Commissioner shall render a written final decision on the application, which shall be binding upon the applicant and upon the State Procurement Council. Charlotte, does that answer your question? Okay. There's a motion to reconsider on the floor with a second. Is there any discussion? Okay. Members of the council in favor of the motion to reconsider, please raise your hand. Okay, so with the exceptions of ESD and John, are you a legislative?
Yes.
Okay, and legislative appointee Sean Cullinane. Everybody else is in favor. Well, not everybody else is in favor. I understand that. Let me call the others. Go ahead and put your hands down. Folks against reconsideration? Okay, our Empire State Development and the legislative appointee, Sean. And then any recusals?
I'm required to recuse.
Just, right. So there's one recusal. So what does that make my math? I'm sorry, are there any abstentions? No, okay. So there are 12 votes in favor of reconsidering the motion to approve this application. Because it's a motion to reconsider, it immediately comes back out as a motion to be considered. So there's now a motion on the floor to approve this application as it was submitted. Is there any discussion or any other actions people want to pursue?
Make a motion to table.
Okay, there's now a motion to table on the floor. Is there a second?
Tom Ipshinsuni seconds.
Okay. Are there any folks that want to rise to discussion on tabling? Okay, seeing none, would you signify your desire to table by raising your hand? It's a yes vote. So we have ITS, DOB, OMH, SUNY, ESD, Corecraft Docs, legislative appointee Steve, DOH, and Amber, who's a legislative appointee. Okay, would you put your hands down, please? Members of the council who are opposed to tabling this discussion. Okay, NYSIB, OPWDD, Ag and Markets, the Comptroller's Office, and legislative appointee Sean Cullinane. Okay, are there any abstentions? Are there any recusals? There's one. Okay, hang on a second. Sorry, if you're opposed, would you raise your hands again? 3, 4, 5. Okay. Patty, you got it? Yep, thank you. Okay. This is frustrating as I imagine this to be, because the vote is 9-5. The vote to table fails, which means we'll consider a vote on the action to approve this application that requires 11 votes to pass. Does anybody want to have any discussion? Does any applicant for this application want to postpone its consideration until next time? No? Okay. Jerry?
Assuming you're going to move, can you read the motion?
Yes. So the motion on the table is to approve the application that has been submitted for spill kits that has been distributed and is under consideration. And, let's make sure I get this right, that particularly on spill kits, if there is a product extension proposed by the applicant, that product extension will be required to be reviewed by ESD before it is approved, narrowing the scope of this approval to these very specific 30-gallon and 55-gallon spill kits, and requiring ESD review before any other product lines would be added. And we'll clean the language up for that, but I think that reflects the intent both the first time and the second time. Does anybody object to that? No? Okay. Would the council members in favor of approving that application please signify by raising your hand? Okay. Is DOB, NYSIB, OMH, OPWDD, SUNY, Ag and Markets, Comptroller's Office, Corecraft, DOH, and Legislative Appointee Amber Mooney.
Your hands up, please.
You want to stretch or anything? No. Okay. Patty, you okay? All right. Those opposed? Okay. So I count ESD, Steve, ITS as 3, right? Thank you. Patty, did you get all of those? Recusals, 1? 1. Okay. Any abstentions? So Sean is an abstention. Let me make sure I counted this correctly. There were 10 votes cast to approve. However, the chair didn't cast a vote. And in this case, the chair casts a vote yes to approve. Thanks for that. We appreciate the effort. We understand the concerns. We really do look forward to working with ESD on a process that helps these questions be answered in advance. And we appreciate all of the council members' diligence on this process. With that said, the second item on our agenda is a resolution regarding application time submission. So in advance of the meeting, a considerable background was distributed to the council, and what we discovered in preparing for the meeting is we did actually have to have a resolution formatted that had to be considered. So we have distributed that to everybody. We apologize for the short notice of that, but that is, we consider fairly administrative. All of the background was submitted in advance. This resolution is designed to address some of the issues that we have sort of been facing over the last hour as a council member, and certainly in past meetings. What we would like to do is move towards applications that are being considered for in front of the Procurement Council. We would like to move to a 90-day application process instead of a 45-day application process. And I know we have some additional background that we can talk about. Since this has come out, we have also gotten feedback that if we are moving to a 90-day process, that 90-day process should set expectations on OGS's review and on any other reviews also, so that in the future, applications that are submitted, timely to that 90-day application process should be, except under extreme circumstances, should be heard at the next council meeting. So I think I have heard that comment loud and clear. I don't know how we want to consider that in the discussion for this. The other question is, we have been asked this question. This is a procedural matter before this council. It does not require recusal by any of the preferred sources. During the discussion of this, I think that there is that opportunity to have that conversation. So there was a lot of background provided. There is a resolution in front of you. Does anybody have questions they want to ask about it, or do they want to move directly to discussion? Charlotte?
Because the council only meets every 90 days, does a 90-day application process really mean that it would be 180 days before the council could vote on something?
So we meet quarterly, and there is a larger than 90-day gap in some cases, so it doesn't mean that. I think our hope would be that applications would be targeted either right before a procurement council meeting or right after, and then we would have the entire time between one submission and between the submission and the next procurement council meeting to consider it. I don't know that the purpose is to get to 180 days, and if 90 days is wrong and we have to do 89 days or something in order to avoid that, I don't believe the intention is to try to push it out 2 council meetings, no. So if this doesn't accomplish that, then we would want to know from the council what changes to make for that. Questions or comments?
It would seem as written that it would most likely cause it to be 180 days, unless there was an application on the table at a council meeting. It seems that looking at lengthening it out really could cause hardship to anyone who's putting forward an application. I would think that we'd want to look at a process in its totality, not just the deadlines. And I might encourage us to go back and see what that process is from application to coming to this council. But candidly, 90 days seems long.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Any other comments? Sean?
What makes the 45 days insufficient? That's what's been on the table so far, or the process so far. What makes that insufficient now?
So, John and Noreen, if you have anything you want to add, that's great. I think what we're finding is, particularly with the delegated authority to OGS, where it does require multiple agency participation, going through that process, doing the review, asking a lot of questions on applications, where the applications, at least from the OGS perspective, and I wouldn't speak from the ESD perspective, but from the OGS perspective, these applications, once we've gone through them, they require a lot of questions and clarifications. And the mechanics of getting those answers, we're finding in each opportunity to come before the council, we're pressing right up against those deadlines in order to be successful in having both a timely recommendation to the council, something that's distributed in advance that allows everybody to consider it properly, and also that is complete, that answers all of our questions from OGS and make sure that we have both an OGS and an ESD recommendation in hand. Did I forget anything?
We're the same group of people that's staffed to the council and reviewing the applications.
So we're working on this in OGS of having 2 teams. So there has been some preparing for in the home stretch of preparing documents for the council, and also trying to close out applications. With the 45-day deadline, that 45-day deadline, so if an application meets the 45-day deadline, and then we're trying to accumulate documents in the last 10 days before the council meeting, that does produce some challenges, both for us and for the council's review. And we have heard some frustration from the council about a lot of frustration from the council about how our documents have been distributed and how they continue to change up until the council time. So those are considerations those are things we took into consideration in putting this forward, at least for discussion. And bless you. And if this is not the right approach, then our hope is that we can find an approach that allows timeliness for review of application and also timeliness of submission to the council of documents.
A question, Phil Gellner, Ag and Markets. Have you done a lean exercise on this to see whether or not there's a way to maybe shorten your process time or your cycle times?
So I know that we've done a lean process on the actual application and the barriers for the application on individual services being provided. Let me check and see if the whole process has been. Okay, so the lien process was done on the whole application process. I think the feedback from lien, and something that we have addressed and that we're going to talk about under new business, is a lot of that concern was how the application was set up and what the expectations were for the application. So we have attempted to address those, but it hasn't gone in the field yet. So there certainly are those concerns. The lien process did not include the overlap of services of staff to the council versus preferred source staff. We are attempting to address that in OGS because we are aware that that also impacts the issue. So we did not include that in the lien study, but I'm not sure I need a lien study to have acknowledged that as a problem, certainly over the last two planning meetings. Planning sessions for this council meeting. So I agree with you that that issue has to be addressed. The lien process produced a discomfort with the application itself in terms of its clarity and the ability to know what was expected on the application, which should hopefully cut down on the questions that have to be asked. Beyond that, I don't know that it has addressed the rest of the getting the agencies coordinated, getting it in front of the Procurement Council, those sorts of details. Okay. Yes, Mary Beth. The question on the table is the resolution says should, and is it the intention of OGS to make it mandatory at 90 days? Is that a correct restatement? Yes. Okay. Mary Beth, can you just let us know where in that it is so that we're responding to you correctly?
Application lead times.
Is that in the background? Okay, so that's the background, right? Okay, so I think
quote. So I'm assuming it's quoting something here. I'm not sure what it's quoting.
Council's going to take a look at that.
No, I have that, but is this? You're modifying something that said should, and you're changing it to 45. It's in quotes. I don't know what this is quoting, but it's in quotes.
Is it?
I guess my bottom line question is, if they get it in 60 days, and you can get your work done in 60 days, are you going to make it wait till the next one because it didn't make 90 days?
No, I think the concern for us is if the applications don't have a lot of questions and there's a lot of way to move that forward, I think we would like to do it as quickly as possible. One of the challenges we have is between council meetings, if we can get, because we have those steps of having to have a recommendation and perhaps having to bring it to the council, being able to provide comprehensive documents to the council in advance is already 10 days. So just the 45 days leading right up doesn't really give us a lot of that breathing room to get the applications finished, reviewed, and into the council. So I would much rather do it faster. I can't speak for, some reviews are very complicated. We've been through that already today. So I don't want to speak for any other agencies. Our intent is to move it as fast as possible. Once we have all of the answers to the questions. And I think they're still discussing your questions, so we can work on the citation. So, in the meantime, does anybody else have questions or comments? Ron.
I don't know if this is on. Yeah, just a comment, echoing what Charlotte said earlier. If an application isn't put forth the day after a council meeting, then using 90 days, it would have to go to the second council meeting after the 90 days. In other words, it would automatically be a 180-day time frame. So, given that, I think a little more time, 60 days, as long as the period fits in between council meetings, I have no objection. But that one, 90 days would be almost 180 days, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
That I think is too long.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Do you have a comment? Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
If I could yield to Carrie Laney just to speak to the impact going to 90 days and really 180 days, as far as I read it, would have on the preferred source program.
Sure.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the council members. I do want to speak to the resolution put before you to vote today to extend the time frame for which we have to get our application into OGS. Let me first say, I appreciate where OGS is trying to get to. You're trying to get the materials, the application approved, and materials to the Procurement Council so they have adequate time to review. And that makes the meeting easier for us, too. So let me just acknowledge that. And the review by OGS's team often makes our submission better. So that's valuable time. But I think if we put together maybe a working group, and I think Ron referenced that, where we could establish some toll gates, instead of maybe just some black line 90 days that might really add time. We're often have a customer waiting, and we're afraid we're going to lose that opportunity to create job opportunities for New Yorkers who are blind. And I know that's not your intention to do, but that can be the unintended consequences of requiring additional lead time. So there are things like in the last year, and I was supportive of this, if there's gaps in our application, the ones that you have standing authority on, you send us letters of lack of information letters. I think that's fair. It clearly denotes where the next step needs to be and who's responsible for moving it. I think we could look at a process where there's some toll gates along the way. Do you think what I've sent you is complete? Do you think I've answered your basic questions? And at what time frame out do we need to hit those before we know we can make the next Procurement Council meeting? So those would be my suggestions, and I'd love to be part of a conversation to talk about that further.
So I think from OGS's perspective, one of the challenges is we've come to a number of the preferred sources, I think in almost every instance since I've been here, and identified a lack of completeness or an issue that we've asked for permission to extend to the second council meeting. And we have some concerns about if we could get it earlier in the cycle between the two meetings. I agree with the concern, though. The intention was never to go to the second meeting. The intention was to get so much time in between the two meetings to review it that we weren't coming to any of the preferred source facilitators and suggesting that we postpone consideration. A number of the things we have considered have been pushed out to that 6-month mark. And I think our intention is to try to find a way to solve that problem, because we would rather do it in 3 months. So if the concern is the specific date, or the concern is unintended consequences there, if the general consensus is that this resolution needs a little bit more work, I'm open to hearing a couple more comments and considering withdrawing it for discussion. The only concern I want to put out there is, in the meantime, if consideration could be given with how applications are submitted to the fact that if they have to go to the Procurement Council, we go backwards. Procurement Council, 10 days in order to give the Procurement Council notice of all of the documents that are expected to be there, and then we have to work backwards from that. So in the absence of this change, we could do it voluntarily and attempt to try to address that while we try to do it. So I just, that is not an official request. It's not anything other than it would make this process easier for us to have the application earlier than later in the preparation for the Procurement Council. Okay? Does anybody have other comments? I saw some heads nod when I suggested withdrawing it. I would like to get the council's general sense before I do that. David.
David Russo, OMH. So yeah, I think for my concern is, again, getting the documentation prior to the meeting so we have time to absorb it, not only to absorb it, but to potentially ask questions back to OGS to get answers before we come to the council, because by the time we get here, it's kind of too late for you guys to get the answer. So if you said it has to be submitted to the council 20 days prior to the next council meeting to give us time to review it and then have an opportunity to ask questions both to OGS and potentially the preferred source, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
This is Phil Giltner, Ag and Markets. I tend to understand the situation that you've got here, and you need more time to prepare. But first of all, we always know there's never enough time for anything, right? And we also know that work tends to expand to fill the available time. And I think that we may be finding that we have just made things just go longer. And in the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, the idea of keeping things moving as quickly as possible, I'd like to see some other ways to make this more effective and without really having that sort of whale of a problem with everybody suddenly having 180 days to get something approved.
Just, I'm starting to get a sense what everybody thinks we should do, but I did want to ask a question. Is to some extent there might be an option to move the application date and still maintain a date, and this is going to be for discussion. I think what OGS is going to do is withdraw it, but food for thought for the council is we could have a finite amount of time that's required to review it that matches up with 10 days or 15 days before the council meeting in order to provide the information, still put some boundaries on review, but it still has to be submitted that many days before the council meeting in order to make sure we hit that. So I don't think we're talking about an unbounded process. We're not necessarily looking for, you're right, we're not looking for other work to fill that time and then to have 90 days not be correct. So what we're going to do here is we're going to withdraw this resolution. So because it hasn't been motioned and seconded, as the sponsor, we can remove it without having any other mechanics for it. I think we would like everybody to take a look at this, take a look at the impact from their perspective, and I think you would not be surprised to know that it is our intention to want to have that time frame expanded or modified or otherwise understood at the next council meeting, so that'll provide enough time to ask questions and those sorts of things. I'm sorry, Amber.
So would OGS consider a 60-day expansion of the time period?
Yeah, I think with us withdrawing it today, we'd like to get all of those comments, and I think before committing to a different time frame, we'd like to find out whether that solves the problem, right? Does it actually let us? So the goal here is to get things as early in the procurement council cycle as possible, to get them to appear in front of you if they have to in the 3 months that they've been submitted, and to not miss those deadlines because we have unanswered questions. So as long as it's clear that our intention is to try to make this process easier, we're willing to take input from anybody we need to for that. From the formal work group perspective, the big challenge I have with that is work groups require staff. They require staff time. And so if there's a commitment from a group of people to get together to talk about this and to work through it, I'm willing to do that. If the best way for everybody to share their impression is to just send us all of that and have us aggregate it and redistribute it instead of it being a work group, I think we're okay with that also. either way, we want the council's feedback on it, and we want to understand how we can best get inside this, whether it's 90 or 100-day period, the time between council meetings. We would like to maximize and have applications that come in during that time have enough time to be reviewed, enough time for the council to review them, and have them on the agenda when you commit. Okay? So if anybody wants to share anything else, great. Otherwise, Tom?
Tom Hipchen from SUNY. Is there a reason why it just says days? It doesn't identify business days, calendar days, or just days?
I think because the council meets quarterly. So it ended up being just a number. When it's not specified, it's a number of days total. It includes all of the weekend days and that sort of thing in there, because some of those days are the days we're using to try to get these things on the calendar. Yes. Mary Beth.
I want to switch topic a little bit if I can. So we have a lot to go on this agenda. Is there a requirement that we have the review of the preferred sources that you guys have approved already? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, can we stop soon?
Hang on. So there are other parts that we can expedite through. We actually do have to do that part, although that update is very brief.
Yep.
And
I thought you might have to do that
briefer even. Briefer. Okay. And then we'll address some of the other items of whether we can move the meeting along here. So let's do that, and let me see if I can figure out how we can address moving some of these final items along. Okay. All right, John.
This report while you work on that. Okay, in the period from January 1 through April of 2017, there were 4 approvals that OGS made under the delegated standing authority from the council. I'm going to assume everyone's familiar with the 3-part test. All 4 of the applications involved NYS PSP applications. 2 of them were for pens. The pens allow users to operate them while wearing gloves, writing upside down on wet or dry surfaces. The Defender pen will provide 99.82 direct disabled labor hours annually. The Illuminator pen, 83.48 hours annually. Both commodities are offered with 100% direct labor supplied by blind and visually impaired employees. The Tactical Mechanical Tourniquet, designed for massive hemorrhage control in an extremity. New product line will provide 240 direct disabled labor hours annually. 77% of the direct labor will be provided by blind and visually impaired employees. Finally, tuna and mackerel in ready-to-serve pouches under the brand names Fresh Catch and StarKist. Briefly, the new product line will provide 906.2 direct disabled labor hours annually, which equates to 0.4833 FTEs. 82% of the labor will be provided by blind and visually impaired employees.
Does anyone have any questions? I really just wanted tuna on the record. No, does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so here's what we're going to do to expedite. All of the other items on the agenda are optional. So I'm going to run through them really quickly, and then we'll go forward from there. We have 2 items of old business also to address, but we'll do these as quickly as we possibly can, and then my staff will be available, and I will be available to the council for any questions, okay? On here is a GovBuy report out. That's just an opportunity for the council to understand some of the procurement items that are happening in OGS. Our big procurement training happened several weeks ago. We had over 1,300 attendees and did a lot of training. We can provide feedback or updates to the council as they prefer, or if there's an opportunity, we'll have my staff come back and brief you on the successes and the go-forward plan for that event at some point at a future council meeting. We wanted to make sure that this was on here. One of the items that we talk about a lot in this council meeting is items that we've talked about today, the preferred source applications and the application process. OGS at the request, it started at the request of the preferred sources, and it sort of became something that we also found very, very exciting as an opportunity, was to present a town hall meeting to go through a lot of the questions that had been asked from the preferred sources. We did that in conjunction with, although not as an event for GovBuy. What we have done is posted the PowerPoint for that town hall to our website. So if any of the council members are interested in that, rather than briefing it here, certainly we would love it if you would take a look at that. Part of that process was several other things. One was a unified application process that we're working on the technical details of, so stay tuned for a link in the next, probably 2 weeks, but we're working on the technicalities of drop-down boxes, so it's very easy for an agency to fill in the application, and we're hoping that it is easier to address for the preferred sources provider, and that some of the concerns that the preferred sources have had about the process can be addressed that way. Not all of them. We're very clear that there are still a few gaps in interpretation and in the application that have to be addressed. But those are things that we're hopeful for. In terms of increasing the speed of those applications and being reviewed, which can be part of our consideration, hopefully, of the resolution we just withdrew, we've made a commitment that we're going to do a completeness review of every application in hopefully less than, but at no more than 10 business days, so that every application in will know what it's missing and what it needs to happen in order to have a full review. So those are things that came out of that process. Anybody who wants copies of those documents or any questions about those, please feel free to direct those to our office. Also, and we'll remember to send a link out to the council members this week. Also on that site is now the tracking form for all applications that have been submitted through a preferred source. When they were submitted, what stage they're at in the application, and so that if there are any questions your host agencies have or that you have about the process, that information is now available on the website. So that's what most of those items were. There's an old business item that we do have to address. David, can I recognize you for old business? Would you?
So back in 2014, OMH has decided to discontinue our BioMH program. So with that decision, we've had discussions with OGS to remove the BioMH program from the preferred source out of 162 of the state finance law.
Okay, and I think we're removing it out of the listing, right? Okay. So what Noreen is saying is that it's already removed on the list, but the text is not removed yet. So we will take that as something that has to be corrected. We asked OMH to address that here because it had not been on the record previously. So we wanted the Procurement Council to have access to that. So thank you for doing that, David. Also under old business, Patty or Sue, do you have the? Oh, John has them. So for council members, you have posed a question to us as staff about open comment and public comment at these meetings. What we're passing around to council members is a draft of that. It's not part of the official body of work of this meeting yet, because it's not for consideration today. It's for consideration in anticipation of review next time. So this is one of those places where we have a distinction in our roles. So as staff to the Procurement Council, we have prepared what is a draft or a discussion for a document for discussion. What we don't have yet is either a consensus or a call from the members to move in this direction and to have public comment, nor do we have feedback to something we just distributed. So our hope is by we'd like to say by August 1st. So the next meeting is in September. If everybody can review this, ask us questions, and ultimately send us a response, is public comment a rule change you see as beneficial to the council? And also, in that vein, did we get it right? Are there big things you want to see changed? We would love that feedback. We will aggregate all of those comments as staff, and we will resubmit them to the council for consideration at the next meeting. They will require someone to motion to make that rule change, and all of the procedures that we went through today. Only, hopefully, we've talked about it already in some regard, and it doesn't take quite as long. But those are things you have asked us for, that we are providing for you as staff, that we are hoping over the next 4 or 5 weeks you will take a look at and give us feedback on. Okay? The last items were housekeeping items. This council has asked us they've asked us a number of questions about how we operate, and obviously some of those rules, when they get really complicated, we're still ironing out. We did commit today to get you a set of rules of how Robert's Rules works, and an abridged version of that, so we will do that. Nobody wants the whole version, right? It's like 900 pages. No, okay. So it's a one-pager or something like that, we'll get that. We have heard the question about how do we get all of the documents out to everybody, and also how do we make sure that everybody has in front of them at these meetings anything they may need. OGS has purchased tablets for everyone on this council. And the plan is when you arrive to these council meetings, you will have a tablet, and that tablet will contain you'll already have been sent the documents will have been published to you, but you will also, as some school boards and other legislative bodies do, we're going to provide that to you, and that will, for the purposes of taking minutes, you won't have to hold your hand up anymore. You'll be able to vote through that device, and all of that will obviously be in accordance with the public meetings law. So we are looking for ways for you to have that in front of you. We're also looking for ways to make sure that these documents get to you in advance. So we owe you some answers on what our role is, some summary answers on those questions. We are working on those this summer. And we owe you some answers on timeliness of documents and tracking when documents have to be generated so they can be distributed to you. And then a question and answer process in advance of the meeting if you have any. So those are things that we heard very, very clearly last time. We are in flight on those. We're hoping to report again on those at the next meeting. Does anybody have any other procedural or structural items that they want to add to that list, as long as we're here? No? I waited to wear you out until I asked that question. No? Okay. Open council discussion. Are there any topics that have not been covered here today that council members want to raise as part of open discussion? Ron?
I would just ask that for next meeting we have a status update on our tabled application for mail fulfillment.
So from the council perspective, there is a tabled application, and my understanding is that hold on a second. Right. So it was tabled. So the procedural rules are that if this council wants to reconsider it, they can bring it back from being tabled. There's not really a status for like a work group or something to be brought back. So there's not a status to report that I know of, right? Oh, maybe I'm confused. I know there's one item that's tabled and there's one item that was sent to a work group, right? Which one are you talking about? I'm sorry.
Application of last May that was tabled.
The one that was tabled?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So the council and council staff won't have a status of that. It's really procedural here. I know there were some concerns from council members that caused it to be tabled, and we're recommending that those if you want to work with those members and get that addressed. Procedurally from the council, the status is it's still tabled. So someone has to motion to bring it back to the table for consideration, and then we would open it back up to council discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
But we can certainly provide that status in writing if that's more convenient. Anybody else for open council discussion? Going once, going twice. Hearing none. The chair will consider a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, okay, great. So, Ag and Markets motioned and DOH seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any nays, abstentions, recusals? Okay, great. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.